The reason I'm here today introducing this particular Monday at Beinecke is because we have a special exhibition opening that is really a part of the larger exhibition gallery that is now located in the Sterling Memorial Library nave. And this exhibition is in this fabulous new exhibition space we have called the Hanke Exhibition Gallery. I'm showing you an image of that now on screen. For years, we've aspired to have a state-of-the-art exhibition gallery in the Sterling Memorial Library, where we could share inspiring stories from across the library's special collections in a central space. Thanks to the great generosity and vision to support our special collection mission, Lynn and Robert Hanke have allowed us to finally open this space. And I'm going to show you another nice image of a plaque just installed this past week. Lynn Hanke, a member of the University Library Council, and Rob Hanke, class of 1960, have generously supported this space and, along with all of us, waited patiently throughout the pandemic for its opening. While we would all love to be in person today to be opening this, we will have ample opportunities to show off this incredible gallery in the coming months, especially during reunions this summer. For those of you who know something of the history of the Sterling Memorial Library and of campus architecture, architect James Gamble Rogers looms large. He is the architect of Sterling, and his legacy was an important motivator for Lynn and Rob in the vision for this gallery, as you can see wonderfully on this plaque here, announcing given in the memory of James Gamble Rogers. This new gallery space enhances a visitor's ability to engage with the extraordinary architecture of Sterling by creating a focal point for a visit, as well as creating new sightlines to appreciate the splendor of the nave. The gallery seamlessly and elegantly integrates into the fabric of the space, while also providing the best possible environment to exhibit our exhibition safely. And I'm going to show you now just a few wonderful images of our staff installing this particular exhibition. We've got our exhibition staff here in the Hanke Gallery. This gallery enables us to realize our vision for a more unified special collections in the Yale Library. In the last year, the Yale Library has worked to better bring together the 7 special collection repositories in the library. This includes arts, the Beinecke, divinity, the Lewis Walpole Library, manuscripts and archives, medical, historical, and music. In doing so, we hope to make it easier for faculty, students, and researchers to use objects from across our collections for their research and teaching. So this exhibition, Points of Contact, Points of View, is the first time objects from all 7 special collection repositories in the Yale Library have been displayed together. The exhibition features over 60 unique objects, books and images from the Yale Library Special Collections. Here you are looking at one such object beautifully displayed in the gallery. These are arranged and displayed so that visitors can experience for themselves how primary sources are used to inspire inquiry, learning, and the creation of new knowledge. Selected from with advice from dozens of library staff, and this was a real team effort, the objects are varied as a 17th century Arabic manuscript about the Nile River, a Korean atlas of the Choson dynasty, the original music and manuscript of Lift Every Voice and Sing, I'll show you that in a moment, a sampler stitch by Kezia Stiles, daughter of Ezra Stiles, and some of Noah Webster's handwritten notes for dictionary entries. I'll show you that Lift Every Voice and Sing wonderful image. You'll also see some images here as well. And finally, a wonderful display case here bringing objects from across the collections together. And so instead of a conventional narrative, the exhibition offers visitors simple questions to spark their personal curiosity, such as who made this? For what purpose was it intended? Whose point of view is represented and whose is left out? The goal is for objects, individually and in conversation with each other, to inspire visitors to find connections, interpretations, and further questions. In some exhibit cases, objects from different eras and places are juxtaposed under broad themes: protesting, justice, self-expression, and knowing. The combinations invite viewers to make their own connections and develop their own fresh perspectives on human experience across time and culture. Outside our music library, not shown here, but as you wander through the nave into the Hanke Gallery and then down through an entrance into the music library, we also are exhibiting clips of audiovisual collection materials and that are paired with related images. Here, the curators offer new questions for interrogating audiovisual formats, including whose voices are recorded, whose are not, how can we understand and evaluate such silences? So with that, I'm going to stop our show and turn the conversation now over to Nancy Kuhl, our curator of poetry and the Yale Collection of American Literature from the Beinecke Library, Bill Landis, the Associate Director for Public Service at Manuscripts and Archives, and Jay Rossman, Director of the Department of Area Studies in Humanities Research Support. They will share highlights of the exhibition and their process in conversation prompted by questions from Michelle Light. Hello all, they're all appearing on screen now. And Michelle Light is our Associate University Librarian for Special Collections and Director of the Beinecke Library. She and all of these folks and others have been tasked with this, this wonderful exhibition, but also thinking more about our special collections in a unified fashion. After this opening conversation among Bill, Nancy, Jay, and Michelle, we'll have some time for the audience, all of you, to ask questions before we close at 5 o'clock. So Michelle, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thanks, everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone. First, I'd like to congratulate our curators and all of the staff involved in creating a truly inspiring exhibit and a spectacular new space. But before we begin our conversation, I just want to let you know that our conversation will be accompanied by a rotating slideshow. And this will offer views of the exhibition's unique collaborative development creation. It will show information about its organizing principles and provide some views of the extraordinary objects that are exhibited. To avoid distraction, the collection materials in the slideshow will be minimally described with text, but a version of the slideshow with complete citations to all of the items is available at a link that you can find in the chat. So first, next we'll have our conversation followed by an opportunity for you to ask questions instead of me. Bill, Jay, Nancy, we are describing you as coordinating curators in that you coordinated a process for dozens of librarians and curators and archivists from across the Yale Library Special Collections to nominate objects to include in this exhibit. Will you tell us a little bit more about your role and this process for nominating and selecting the objects that we see in the exhibit now?
I can start by just saying that we really wanted to draw on the expertise of all of our colleagues, and because we were not approaching this in a sort of traditional exhibition way where we were telling a story or we're developing a narrative. I mean, I have to say, I think Jay and Nancy were a little bit more positive about the outcomes from this. I was really, really worried going into this. I had no idea how we would do this. So we just kind of winged it, and I'll let somebody else talk about the process.
I'm going to jump right in to say it's funny, Bill, to hear you say that you had that you lacked confidence in this, because I feel as though the idea of asking questions was really your idea. I wonder, Jay, if you feel the same way, maybe you'll chime in. But it was my sense that Bill had that idea to say, let's think about how research is done and how our faculty colleagues especially teach with collections, and start from that. How can we draw on all these exciting and compelling objects that our colleagues are nominating, and think about how we can use this new space to think about teaching and research, not from our perspective of how we've found things that are exciting in our collections only, but also how we convey that kind of enthusiasm for research to students on campus as well.
Yeah, I think a major part of our process was looking for themes that went across all of the objects, right? And we had to figure out a process for how to do that. So the three of us got together for several multi-hour sessions where we worked with index cards and spreadsheets, and we reviewed these really compelling descriptions that our colleagues had given us about why this object should be on display. And by looking at the text that our colleagues had given us, we were able to tease out these themes. And that's how we were able to do this idea that was more flexible about asking questions. That wasn't, as Bill said earlier, wasn't a timeline or a specific narrative. And so the work of our colleagues in not just saying, here, look at this, but this is why you should be looking at this, was a really critical part of the process.
Thank you. You've mentioned a number of times about asking questions. Can you tell us more about what kinds of questions? What are some of the themes that the objects helped answer, perhaps?
Well, some of the questions just showed up in the coincidentally in our slideshow. So, all of us, as Nancy was saying, have had experience working in a special collections classroom with a faculty member. So we were really thinking about how faculty members use objects to teach, and that the purpose of an exhibit space has a similar sort of instructional bent to it. So how can we take those lessons we have learned working with faculty in the classroom, translate them into this exhibit, and then Bill came up with this idea of asking questions, and then we had to start asking questions of these objects. Somebody was telling us why it was important, but then there were also these other basic questions, like what do we teach students to do with these? Who made it? Why was it made? Why is it even in the library? Is there something related that isn't in the library? So, we decided to just step it back and go with these really basic questions to show students that this is where you start. And in order to emphasize that, the label text says very specifically, creator unknown or title unknown, when that information wasn't available. So we're emphasizing that point through the labels themselves, as well as with the label text that talks about asking questions. Nancy and Bill, do you want to add anything?
Well, I'll just say that I think I think the notion of asking questions is fundamental to the research. Well, it is fundamental, but I think it's also one of the more difficult things for undergraduates. I mean, one way I like to characterize it is that I often get undergraduates coming to look for primary sources for a question, and their question is often so big that and like they have 6 weeks to write the paper and do the research, and they're asking questions that could be PhD dissertation questions. And a lot of times what I like to encourage them to do is just sit down with some collection materials and start looking, find stuff that's vaguely relevant to the topic that you're interested in, sit down and start looking through it and start letting questions emerge, what kind of, to lead you to other research materials. And I think that's one of the things that we were hoping to do. And it's often a really complex process, but like a number of us have worked with Glenda Gilmore over the years, and she has this really fabulous single question paper assignment that she does, where she will only let her students focus on one question. And they have to write 7 to 10 pages. They can use primary sources, they can use one secondary source, and they have to answer one question and one question only. And it's a really tough assignment, but it focuses on, I think it inspired us to really focus on the kinds of questions that you can ask of these collection materials.
I would just chime in quickly to say that we talked a lot about our different experiences in the classroom teaching ourselves, working in close collaboration with library colleagues and with faculty colleagues. Bill already mentioned Glenda Gilmore, who's someone that he and I both worked with in over years in our careers here at Yale. I think Jay would also have maybe included Laura Wexler, who's someone we've all worked with and who we all referred back to. You know, we work with different faculty. We're in different areas of expertise and specialization in our collections, but that these particular two faculty members kept coming up in our conversations seemed really important in terms of thinking about the contributions they've made to our understanding of our classrooms as laboratories, and this new exhibition space as an opportunity to extend that, you know, from the interactions with small groups and with students in classes to a more, you know, broadcast kind of context where anybody who comes into the library for any reason can have a kind of peek into that experience.
I'm imagining that you got dozens and dozens of nominations for worthwhile items to include in this exhibit. And as instructors, you could imagine the relevance or the excitement that each object might inspire in the classroom. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges in selecting items for this space? What was difficult about making some of these decisions for how to make all of these nominations fit into the gallery space?
Well, I'll say for me, one of the ways that I work when I put an exhibit together is that I know the exhibit space. And I'm thinking about the physicality of the exhibit space at the same time that I'm doing object selection. And that was not possible in this case because it hadn't been built yet. So that was one of our major challenges. How do we devise a process where we're selecting objects theoretically that we don't know yet how they're going to fit into the exhibit case? And so fortunately, there was a slide, Barbara shared a slide of the exhibits team, and if it weren't for Carrie and Sarah and Megan, it would have been really difficult for us to imagine how to put these objects into a space that didn't exist yet. So they created a series of tools for us, some digital, some plain old physical, like measuring out how big the cases were going to be on a table, and to help us visualize. And that was a major part of our process, was going back and forth between theoretically what we were trying to do and then physically what we were trying to do.
We did have I mean, one of our first, I think our first real meeting on this, other than sort of launching the sort of call for nominations, was to take the things that had been nominated, and I can't remember what the grand total was, but I think maybe we ended up using roughly half of the things that were nominated in the actual exhibit, so it was quite a bit. And did we spend a half a day? I think we spent a half a day, like 3 hours, sitting in somebody mentioned a card sort, but that's basically what we were doing, was just looking at all these things and trying to put them together in piles so that we could start looking at relationships between them. And it was such a different process than I think your standard exhibit curation process, where you're often starting with an idea and with collections that you sort of know, and trying to tell a story. And in this case, it was just the opposite, really starting from a pile of suggestions from a lot of really great people who know the collections really well, and then starting to sort of see what kind of themes would surface. And we had some that we jettisoned over the course of time. And I mean, the other thing I'll say, Jay mentioned the physical space. The second we started seeing the cases, it was really clear that our conceptualization for bringing things together around themes worked in the 4 wall cases, but the table cases were too small to be able to really do that successfully. So that was a place where we sort of had to shift gear with the table cases and try to figure out a different approach.
Yeah, and that's where the idea of questions became really important, right? Because we wanted the questions are easily seen in the label text for the wall cases, but how do we make that connect that idea of questions really prevalent in the table cases as well? And so that's where you keep seeing these orange questions that are populated throughout the slideshow. Nancy, I saw you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to underscore how dynamic and really exciting the process was from my perspective. And I think, we laughed a lot, so I know we all had a good time, but Bill mentioned briefly, and I would just, kind of underscore it. It was so exciting to get these nominations from our colleagues who are so knowledgeable about their collections, who have tremendous enthusiasm about objects in their collections, and to bring all that together was, it was very messy. I mean, the card sorting sort of understates how all over the place it was for a part of the time. But that dynamic process it was very exciting and really, even though, we didn't know how it would all sort out, and there were moments of anxiety about how would this all actually come together. It really felt very positive all the way through. And I think that is evident in the, in the kind of finished work too.
I also just wanted to mention that, I mean, one of the big challenges, I think, was when our colleagues nominated things, we gave them lots of space to tell us what they really liked about this or what was important. And we had to lose all of that really fascinating text because it just, we wanted to focus on questions. So we didn't want this to be an exhibit about telling people what this stuff was. We wanted viewers of the exhibit to be stimulated to ask their own questions. And we are hoping the plan is to launch through the course of the 6 months, an Instagram campaign where we can reunite some of the curatorial contextual information that we so appreciated and hated to lose, reunite that back with some of this material and post on Instagram. So
I can't wait to see that. I've been noticing some of the themes come by on the screen: self-expression, injustice, knowing. I'm wondering, do you have a favorite theme or a favorite object that you can make come alive for us in the space?
I was just asked that question the other day by a couple of students that I was in the space with, and it was that question about like having to pick your favorite child or your favorite pet. Like how do you answer that? Like you've developed a relationship with all of these objects over time, and you have affection for all of them. So for me, I wouldn't say it's one favorite object, but I did particularly fall in love with the self-expression case as a whole once it was installed, because not only did I feel like there are several portraits in there. Not only did I feel like the portraits really speak to each other, but there was, because they're all with silver tones of black and white, various forms of black and white photography. There's this visual unity of them, and then there are manuscript pieces at the bottom, which I hope Nancy will talk about Lift Every Voice and Sing, and a maquette, right, for the Augusta Savage sculpture inspired by it, and it just tied in visually beautifully, as well as the story that we were trying to tell about how is a creator, what agency do they have when something is made? Is the sitter in the portrait, how involved are they in this result? And that's one of the questions that we were hoping that researchers would ask of these pieces.
I'll just underscore Jay's comment there. Yeah, Jay's talking about James Weldon Johnson's Lift Every Voice and Sing. The manuscript of the poem, the text, is in the James Weldon Johnson Memorial Collection at the Beinecke. The music that was composed by his brother, Rossman Johnson, that's in the music library. We've exhibited both of those pieces, and then along with them, we have from the 1938 World's Fair, the sculptor Augusta Savage created a beautiful sculpture by that name, using that song as her inspiration. And that sculpture exists now only in small maquette sort of souvenir versions, one of which is in the Beinecke Library's collection. So those are the 3 pieces that Jay was just talking about by name and with a little more context.
Yeah. Thanks, Nancy. And also the slide that just passed where you and I are working with Carrie to do the layout was actually of the self-expression case.
Right, it was. I wanted to just highlight as well, there are 3 tintypes of African-American women from the somewhere in the 1860s, 1870s, maybe into the 1880s, but we don't know who they are. We don't know who took the photographs, and we don't know when exactly or where the photographs were taken. So you sort of think of all this basic information, these basic questions, and we can't really answer any of them. And one of the things I love about those, other than the fact that they're so, tintype, the sort of contrasts of colors in tintype are so just compelling. But one of the things I love about it is that it made me, that was where I got this visceral connection to Laura Wexler's book, Tender Violence, because that book is all about sort of theoretically, how can you approach these images when you really don't know basic facts about the images? What can you, what kinds of questions can you ask that can sort of, help you to sort of understand and know something about them? So anyway, those are 3 particular things that I love, and I was really happy that we were able to put all 3 of them in.
I think I've seen that slide pass by, so we'll keep an eye out for that when it comes by next. I saw another slide that had pictures of all of the Yale Library's special collections on the bottom, and a lot of different crazy lines and all different colors coming out everywhere. Can you tell us a little bit more about that graphic? What is it and what does it convey?
I think that was one of the really fun ideas that we had with how to try to communicate that special collections at Yale is a kind of ecosystem with a lot of different people in a lot of different places, all working towards this similar goal of connecting researchers with materials and making materials available. So we worked with designers, Monica Henry from the Digital Humanities Lab and Rebecca Martz from the Office of the University Printer to help us visualize where the graphic connects what we made 10 basic functions of special collections. People may or may not agree that that is all there is, but that's what we did for the graphic, as well as the 7 locations that Barbara mentioned earlier. Also the area studies and humanities team at Sterling Library and preservation and conservation, because of course we can't forget how important that department is to supporting all of special collections. And so it shows how much work goes on at all of these different places. It's not just one place doing one type of work. It's divided across the system, but it also overlaps and interconnects, and just the way the objects all come together in the show. And you can't walk through the show and say, oh, that's from this collection, oh, that's from this collection. Maybe you could, if you knew them really well, but you don't think about that when you're in the space. You just walk through and see all these objects that are available in Yale Library collections.
So I have 2 more questions for our curators, but I just want to make sure that our audience members know that you can pose questions to our panelists as well. If you would like to enter your questions now into Q&A, and after 2 more questions, we'll see what's there, and we will pose those to our curators as well. So next, you 3 are so experienced in all aspects of the Yale Library exhibitions program. How do you imagine the new Hanke Gallery fitting in? What new opportunities are there with the Hanke Gallery?
I'll jump in and say that this is a space that, many of us who've been involved with exhibitions at the Yale University Library have been imagining and kind of dreaming about for a long time. And so it's extraordinary that it's taken place, and especially at this, time when things have been so challenging in so many different ways, to have this exciting, lively new space come together. And there are lots of opportunities that will be possible that have been challenging in the past, which including bringing these materials together from different collections. There are wonderful kind of rhymes and crosstalk in our different collections that might not be so obvious or visible to students, particularly and other visitors, and we'll be able to make those things much more clear in all kinds of very exciting and visually dynamic ways. We'll also be able to have, it's a beautiful space that will be able to be programmed in different ways. Other kinds of, there may be student curated exhibitions over time. There may be ways for students to be involved in curators in the work of library staff curating shows and that sort of thing. So it's easy to imagine different ways that as we develop an understanding of how the workflows work and how the space works and how it's what our best practices will be. We'll be able to do things we've often thought would be wonderful, but didn't really have a convenient or even plausible, in some cases, space for doing that. So it just opens up an extraordinary amount of opportunity, I think, for creative thinking about exhibitions and the work that exhibitions can do on campus.
Also, just in terms of sheer size, I know from having done memorabilia room exhibits that you needed 100 to 120 objects there. The art special collections exhibit space is much, much smaller. So this is a really nice medium, sort of moderate sized thing. And oftentimes, you have an idea for an exhibit, but it's just not an idea where you could find that much, the size of the spaces that are available might really constrain proposing an exhibit. So I hope that having this kind of in the middle sized space will help people to propose new exhibits that they wouldn't have thought of doing before.
And an unexpected benefit that I hadn't thought of until last week was the proximity of the Hanke Gallery to where we do the student research exhibits in the corridor space. I was with my colleague Cynthia Roman from the Lewis Walpole Library. We were meeting with students in that space because they had been selected to do a future student research exhibit, and we were their librarian liaisons. We were talking to them about that space. After the meeting, Cindy just said to me, hey, do you want to head over to the new Hanke space and look at the exhibit together? And the students were like, oh, can we come with you? So we all walked over there together, just steps away. And we were able to have this conversation about, what Cindy and I do as curators that was very real in that moment, because you could see it. It wasn't us just talking theoretically about how we make choices and what the outcomes were. It was right there, and we could point to it. And I felt that was a really powerful moment.
When I first walked in to the gallery after the cases were set, I was so impressed by the feel of the gallery. It had a sacred quality. It felt very intimate at the same time, but the lighting made it seem as if the objects were glowing. I felt that the cases were drawing me to them in order to look at each object. But my real takeaway was the incredible breadth of the library's special collections. I was so impressed to see different kinds of material from all different periods, representing all different cultures and people. And I was just floored by the amazing collections that the Yale Library has acquired and stewarded over time. I'm curious what you hope might be the main takeaway from someone else. What do you hope that a student or a faculty member or a member from the general public, what do you hope that they take away after experiencing this exhibit?
For me, it's pretty simple. I hope that they think I can go see that later in a reading room, right? I mean, as a really basic takeaway, I hope that, or say, can I find something else like that? I'm excited about this idea, and go to one of the special collections and say, what else do you have?
I think mine is my idea is similar to Jay's, but I'll say it again anyway, slightly different way. I think, you know, this exhibition and the gallery space at the same time really, I hope, bring the research process sort of to a place where anybody can feel it's available to them. Doing research in special collections can seem daunting. It's just, you know, it's a little bit different from what many people are doing in their first year classes or whatever. And they, you know, may be hard for a student to think like, oh, I could do that work. But when you know, are confronted with what really is the way it works, is that you begin by asking a question. Oh, what is this? Like, what's this all about? That's how the research process works, and that's all you need to do is remind yourself that that's where it begins. And you can come into any collection and say, you know, I'm curious about this idea, and what can, you know, and the librarians at Yale are happy to dive in and to help and all of that, which is part of the process too. But all it takes is like curiosity. So that's what I hope folks will see in this show too.
Yeah, I can't add anything new. I mean, I hope it serves as an entry. I hope one object serves as an entry point for everybody who goes to look at the exhibit, to sort of further explore whether they end up in special collections or they end up on the internet trying to find things, just as a sort of, you know, a set of questions, the invitation to ask questions, and then to sort of explore those questions.
I love that. An invitation to explore, an invitation to follow your curiosity, make new discoveries, an invitation to come and do research. That's wonderful. At this point, I am going to look to the Q&A, and we'll take some audience questions. Barbara, if you'd like to join me in going through these.
Absolutely. How about, Michelle, do you want to, we can kind of look through together. It's sometimes easier to have a partner in this. I think the first big question, and one that you're all probably interested in, is the exhibit open to visitors without Yale affiliation? Michelle, what can we say about opening our exhibit spaces?
The Beinecke Library exhibition spaces are open. They opened for the first time last weekend, Saturday and Sunday, noon to 4, I believe. And so the Beinecke spaces are open on weekends. The Hanke Gallery isn't open yet, but we are hoping that we will reopen those spaces soon.
Absolutely. We have proposals out and are working really hard. What I'll say is we feel really strongly that these spaces need to be open. We've got a new unit of community engagement and special collections, and are thinking a lot about having our community, both local and global, in our spaces. And COVID has made that difficult, and so we're working through that. But yes, soon we hope to have these spaces open. The next question that comes up is, do you think you would do this sort of collaborative exhibit again? And what would be the same and what would be different? You answered this a bit, but what do you all think about the collaborative nature of this exhibit?
I'm very enthusiastic about collaboration, and I love to have opportunities to work with my colleagues across the library and learn from them and learn about the collections. And so I would advocate really for others of my colleagues to propose exhibitions that would, you know, bring interesting things from across the collections together, provide opportunities for colleagues who perhaps share interests to explore those interests in different ways, new ways. So I would definitely advocate for that among my colleagues. The collaborative process is made much easier. I think Jay already mentioned Carrie Sancombe and Sarah Davis and Megan Chekai, who are the exhibitions team that we worked closely with. And they really are extraordinary collaborators too. And anybody who worked in this gallery space would, they'd be on the team. And they're wonderful collaborators and really just have an incredible sense of how all the spaces work and how to imagine them when you're curating an exhibition and not actually in the space. In this case, particularly, the space hadn't been built, so it's a little bit different. But so there's a really great support team too, and that's part of it as well. So yeah, I would definitely hope that people embrace this opportunity to collaborate in new ways and show our collections to visitors in ways they haven't had an opportunity to see them either.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I mean, I think that our sort of overarching brief was to represent all the special collections, and that was pretty much it. I would really love, one of the things I would love to see, and I don't know how to make this happen, but to have like a first-year seminar that did the exploration of the collections and nominations, and then have those students work over the course, as to coordinate it so that they work over the course of maybe their first 2 years at Yale or something, to be able to then install an exhibit that sort of emerges out of that nomination or exploration process. I mean, one of the challenges with student curated exhibits is that they take longer than 13 weeks to really put together. I mean, we started on this last spring, I think, or early summer. So finding out a way to engage students in the same sort of process, where they're not telling a sort of pre-scripted story, but looking at objects and letting that surface an exhibit, I think would be really, really cool.
Another question I see is asking for a little more context about an interdisciplinary exhibit space. Can you explain a little bit what you meant by an interdisciplinary exhibit space?
I was going to say, I mean, I can answer that from the simple point of view, as for us, part of it is just that we're not talking about an exhibit space that's embedded in a collection that has a focus, like the arts library or the music library. So it may be a little bit of a shorthand that we're using to say cross collections, maybe, as well as the fact that you're talking about showing materials that are from different disciplines.
I also think that, Yale has a growing number of interdisciplinary programs that aren't necessarily aligned with individual special collections. Like, I mean, ER&M is the one that leaps to mind, that just gets more and more undergraduates every year. And I think this space is a space that that can really appeal to that kind of a program, to really draw on different collections regardless of where they are, as opposed to exhibit spaces that are embedded within a specific special collection.
A quick translation for those who don't know, ER&M is ethnicity, race, and migration, a very popular major these days, and with wonderful faculty.
I think we might have time for one more question, and I'll select this one. How do you remember to take into consideration the point of view of the creator or creators?
It seems to me like the questions that are sort of the focus of this exhibit are one of the ways to do that. I mean, sometimes with more contemporary items, you can have information about from the creator, but there's quite a bit of objects in this exhibit where we don't even know who the creator was. So all we can do is sort of ask those questions, try to be aware of sort of whose voices might be missing in the object, and just really sort of think at the object or objects from a number of different perspectives and find out as much as we can. But in a lot of cases, we'll never know, and that's okay. You can still know something about an object by putting it in context of its time and place. So yeah, I think where the creator is known, and where the creator is conscious, I think of the Josette Monette, the Chippewa woman who's a law school student, whose portrait is in in the case that we talked about, the self-expression case, we know a lot about her, and we know a lot about Nancy. Who's the name of the author or the sort of creator of that whole project?
Will Wilson.
Will Wilson. We know a lot about, so that's a project that's well documented, and you can know quite a bit about it, as opposed to like right underneath her, the 3 African-American women tintypes, where we can't really know anything about it. So I think based on the object you're talking about, you can either do a lot, or you can just basically start asking really interesting questions and digging.
You know what, Michelle, I think we're going to sneak one more in. Can we do it? I think we can.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so we've got a question about working without a story or timeline will feel off the box or out of the box to many. How can you make your wonderfully fun and exciting process a practice for students and faculty? So it seems like a kind of an unorthodox approach to designing an exhibition. Is this extensible? Can you do this with students and faculty, do you think?
I think I'll start, Jay, if you don't mind. I don't mean to interrupt you. I think you know, the way it's extensible in my mind is that, you know, like I'm genuinely I find this work exciting, and I am genuinely curious about the collections that we work with at Yale, and what can and can't be known, and what it means that things can't be known, and all of that. And I think that's what I have to offer in part to students, is that experience of how exciting and yeah, I mean, when you were describing Michelle walking into the gallery and how beautiful the space is, and the kind of complexity of the collections, I find that very moving when I walked into that space. And that's part of the experience of research too, you know, and that it has affect, and it has pleasure, and fun and surprise, and all of that is part of what we can offer in the classroom or in a gallery spaces. That, you know, I know students are doing hard work, and they are bringing everything in their power and their intellect, and they're learning, and it's hard, and all of that is true. And it's also can be really full of excitement, and so that's part of, I think, what we can do to extend that idea of, you know, how this can be sort of reproduced.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The excitement is what drives it. You know, I thought of it as akin to a grounded theory methodological approach, where you have a set of data, and you look at the data, and you look for the story that the data tells you, and what emerges out of that data. And so I think if you can explain it as something, a theoretical approach that already exists, but we're applying it in a different way, we're applying it to objects, we're doing something different with what emerges out of, instead of a data set, a set of objects. But it's already similar to approaches that exist already for research.
That's great. Excellent. Well, thank you all. I'm going to wrap up here, if I may. First, let me thank everyone here on the panel, Nancy, Bill, Jay, and Michelle, for your wonderful questions and your process. This is just really an excellent example of how you all work together so creatively. And, you know, I want to thank all those not appearing on the panel who participated in this, all the curators, all the staff, the exhibition staff, preservation, people throughout special collections, and all throughout the library who really made this possible. This was a real group effort. So yes, very good, Nancy. Yes, good. Kudos to all. This is really fantastic. I would also like to take this moment to thank Mike Morand, as always, for being an excellent curator of this Mondays at Beinecke, and for all that he does to bring our work to all of you. And finally, I'll just end by thanking Robin Lynn Hanke again. You heard, I think, so eloquently today, the power of bringing together these objects, the beauty of the space. I don't know who said, was it you, Michelle? You said the objects sort of glow. It has a sort of sacred nature. I think that is absolutely true. And so thank you, Robin Lynn, for your generosity in making this possible. So thanks all for joining us. We'll see you next week, and hopefully soon within the walls of the library. Thank you all. Take care.